I was sitting alone at our dining room table looking at the small chocolate cake I'd bought for myself when I heard Brandon's key in the front door. "Honey, we're home!" he called out in that fake, cheerful voice he used when he was up to something. I could hear him laughing with Tyler in the hallway, their voices loud and excited like two kids who'd just pulled off the perfect prank. "She's going to lose it completely," Tyler whispered, but not quietly enough. "This is going to be epic," Brandon replied. "I almost feel bad about doing this on her birthday." "Don't," Tyler said firmly. "She needs to learn her place. This is perfect timing." I sat perfectly still, my hands folded in my lap, waiting for whatever they had planned. After 4 years of marriage, I knew that tone in Brandon's voice. It meant he was about to do something cruel and expect me to be grateful for it. They walked into the dining room together, both wearing expensive suits and matching grins that made my stomach turn. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," Brandon announced, throwing his arms wide like he was presenting me with something wonderful. Tyler stood beside him, holding a manila envelope and trying not to laugh. "We got you a very special present this year," Brandon continued, his eyes gleaming with excitement. "Something every woman dreams of." "What is it?" I asked quietly, even though I already knew this wasn't going to be good. Tyler stepped forward and dropped the envelope on the table next to my cake. "Your freedom, Camilla. Happy birthday." Brandon burst out laughing. "Open it. Open your present." I picked up the envelope with steady hands and pulled out the papers inside. Official legal documents with my name at the top. Divorce papers, already filled out and ready for my signature. "Surprise!" Brandon shouted, clapping his hands. "I'm divorcing you. Isn't that the best birthday gift ever?" Tyler was recording with his phone, probably planning to post my breakdown on social media later. "You can't be serious," I said, looking up at my husband's delighted face. "Oh, I'm completely serious," Brandon said. 4 years is long enough, don't you think? Time for me to upgrade to someone more suitable. Someone with more class, Tyler added helpfully. Someone who actually understands business and success. They both started laughing again, waiting for me to start crying or begging or throwing myself at Brandon's feet. Instead, I picked up the pen Brandon had thoughtfully provided and calmly signed every page that required my signature. "There," I said, setting the pen down. "All done." Brandon's laughter died in his throat. "What?" "I signed them," I said simply. "The divorce papers. Isn't that what you wanted?" Tyler stopped recording. "She's not crying." "Why aren't you crying?" Brandon demanded, like I was ruining his fun. I reached under the table and pulled out a beautifully wrapped gift box I'd placed there earlier. "Actually," I said, standing up with the box in my hands, "I have something for both of you too." Brandon and Tyler exchanged confused glances. "What is it?" Tyler asked suspiciously. "A gift," I said with my sweetest smile. "For both of you, to celebrate this special day." I held out the box, watching as they stared at it like it might explode. "Open it later," I suggested. "When you get to your office. I think you'll find it very illuminating." Brandon took the box, turning it over in his hands. "What's in it?" "Just a little something I've been working on," I said. "Think of it as my way of saying thank you for these wonderful 4 years." Tyler started laughing again. "She's giving us a goodbye present. This is too perfect." "Probably cookies or some sentimental garbage," Brandon said, shaking the box. They both headed for the door, still chuckling about their successful prank. "Enjoy your gift, boys," I called after them. "I hope it's everything you deserve." After they left, I sat back down at the table and checked my watch. 3 hours until the raid. I took a small bite of my birthday cake and smiled. Happy birthday to me. 4 years ago, I wasn't Camila Torres, the graphic designer. I was federal prosecutor Camila Torres, and I'd just been handed the biggest case of my career. This organization has been moving dirty money through legitimate financial firms for over 6 years. my supervisor, Agent Harrison, explained, spreading photos across the conference table. They're sophisticated, careful, and we've never been able to get close enough to gather real evidence. I studied the surveillance photos of well-dressed men in expensive suits conducting what looked like normal business meetings. Our target is Brandon Walsh, Agent Harrison continued, pointing to a photo of a handsome man with perfectly styled hair and a confident smile. Mid-level executive at Sterling Financial Group. We believe he's a key player in their money laundering operation. What's the plan? I asked. Deep cover. Long-term infiltration. We need someone on the inside who can document their activities and gather evidence of their crimes. How long are we talking? However long it takes. Could be years. I looked at Brandon's photo again. He had the kind of arrogant smile that told me he thought very highly of himself. What's his type? I asked. Agent Harrison pulled out a psychological profile. Walsh is narcissistic and controlling. He likes women who appear weak and dependent, who make him feel superior and important. His dating history shows a pattern of relationships with women he can dominate. Perfect. I could work with that. 3 weeks later, I was sitting in a coffee shop across from Sterling Financial Group, wearing a simple sundress and reading a romance novel, when Brandon Walsh walked in for his usual morning coffee. I'd been watching his routine for days. Same time, same order, same table by the window where he could see and be seen. When he approached my table, I pretended to be startled. "Excuse me," he said with that confident smile. "Is anyone sitting here?" "Oh no, please," I said, quickly closing my book and moving my purse. I work from home, so coffee shops are my office." "Work from home? What do you do?" "Graphic design," I said, letting a little insecurity creep into my voice. "Freelance stuff. It's not very exciting." Brandon's eyes lit up. A creative type who worked alone and probably struggled financially, perfect for a man who wanted to feel like a provider and protector. "That sounds fascinating." He lied smoothly. "I'm Brandon. I work in finance." "Camilla," I replied, giving him a shy smile. "Finance sounds so complicated. I'm terrible with numbers." That first conversation lasted 2 hours. Brandon loved explaining his important job to someone who seemed impressed by his success. I asked innocent questions that made him feel smart and accomplished. "Maybe I could take you to dinner sometime," he suggested as we were leaving. "There's this great place downtown, very upscale." "Oh, I don't know," I said, biting my lip. "Those fancy places make me nervous. I'm not really sophisticated enough for places like that." Brandon practically glowed. "Don't worry, I'll take care of everything." Our first date was everything I'd expected. Brandon chose an expensive restaurant where he could show off his knowledge of wine and impress me with his willingness to spend money. He talked about his success, his ambitions, and how hard it was to find a genuine woman who wasn't just interested in his money. "Most women I meet are so materialistic," he said, cutting his steak. "They want designer clothes and expensive jewelry. But you're different. You're simple, in a good way." I let him believe I was grateful for his attention, that I couldn't believe someone so successful would be interested in someone like me. Over the following months, I played my role perfectly. The struggling artist who was amazed by Brandon's business acumen, the simple girl from a small town who was overwhelmed by his sophisticated lifestyle, the grateful girlfriend who couldn't do enough to show her appreciation for his generosity. Brandon ate it up. He loved having someone who made him feel powerful and important. He enjoyed explaining basic concepts to me and watching me look confused by complicated business terms. When he proposed after 18 months, he framed it as him rescuing me from my uncertain freelance income. "You'll never have to worry about money again," he promised, slipping the ring onto my finger. "I'll take care of everything." I said yes with tears in my eyes. Real tears, actually, because I was already gathering enough evidence to destroy his entire operation, 2 years into our marriage, Brandon stopped pretending to respect me. It started with small things that I might have overlooked if I wasn't trained to notice behavioral changes. The way he'd interrupt me mid-sentence during dinner. How he'd answer my questions with exaggerated sighs like I was bothering him with my stupidity. "Camilla, honey," he said one evening when I asked about his day, "you wouldn't understand the complexities of corporate finance. Let's just say I handled some very important business today." "I'd like to try to understand," I said gently, playing the eager wife trying to connect with her husband. Brandon laughed. "Sweetheart, you think a successful logo design is complicated. What I do involves millions of dollars in international regulations. It's not exactly coloring books in pretty fonts." I smiled and nodded like his explanation made perfect sense, while mentally noting that he'd just admitted to handling millions of dollars in transactions that normal finance executives wouldn't typically manage. Tyler Monroe started visiting our house more frequently, usually showing up during dinner with takeout from expensive restaurants. "Hope you don't mind, Cam," Tyler would say, never actually waiting for permission before making himself comfortable. "Brandon and I have some business to discuss." Tyler had this way of looking at me like I was a piece of furniture that happened to be in his way. He'd talk to Brandon like I wasn't in the room, discussing things that sounded like normal business, but had strange undertones. "The Singapore client wants to increase their monthly transfers," Tyler said during one dinner, speaking around me as if I were invisible. "We'll need to adjust the processing schedule." "Can we handle that volume without triggering any automated flags?" Brandon asked, cutting his steak. "My contact at the bank says we're still well within normal business parameters, as long as we keep rotating the account numbers." I continued eating my salad, looking appropriately bored by their boring business talk, while my prosecutor brain was cataloging every detail. Normal, legitimate businesses don't rotate account numbers to avoid automated flags. Brandon started treating me like hired help rather than his wife. He'd leave his clothes on the floor expecting me to pick them up. He'd invite people over without telling me, then act annoyed when I didn't have enough food prepared. "Tyler's bringing some associates over tonight," he announced one Thursday afternoon. "Make sure there's decent wine and something impressive for dinner." "How many people?" I asked. "I don't know. 6, maybe 8. Figure it out, Camilla. That's what wives do." That evening, I served dinner to 7 men who spoke in code about shipments and processing fees and clean transfers. They barely acknowledged my existence except to compliment Brandon on his lovely wife, who was so good at taking care of the home. "You're lucky, Walsh," one of them said. "Hard to find a woman who knows her place these days." Brandon beamed with pride. "Camilla's traditional. She understands that a man's work is his business, and a woman's job is supporting that work." After the guests left, Brandon was in an unusually good mood. "You did well tonight," he told me while I cleaned up the kitchen. "The guys were impressed with how well-behaved you are." Well-behaved, like I was a trained pet. "I'm glad I could help," I said, loading glasses into the dishwasher while thinking about the recording device I'd hidden in the dining room chandelier. Tyler started making jokes about my intelligence in front of Brandon, testing to see how far he could push. "Does Camilla understand what money laundering is?" he asked Brandon one evening, laughing like it was the funniest thing he'd ever said. "Tyler, don't be mean," Brandon replied, but he was smiling too. "Camilla knows about washing clothes, not washing money." They both laughed while I pretended to look confused by their joke. "What's money laundering?" I asked innocently. "Don't worry about it, sweetheart," Brandon said, patting my head like I was a child. "It's just business terminology. Nothing you need to understand." If only he knew that I'd prosecuted more money laundering cases than both of them had probably ever heard of. The worst part wasn't their cruelty. It was how much they enjoyed it. They thought they were so clever, so superior to the naive little wife who couldn't possibly understand their sophisticated criminal enterprise. What they didn't realize was that every insult, every dismissive comment, every careless conversation was building the case that would destroy them both. Tyler Monroe became the cancer that slowly poisoned what was left of my marriage to Brandon. Before Tyler's divorce 6 months ago, He'd visit maybe once a week for a beer and some sports on TV. After his ex-wife took half his assets and his house in the settlement, Tyler practically moved into our living room. "Women are parasites," he announced during one of his increasingly frequent visits, sprawled across our couch with his feet on my coffee table. "They latch onto successful men, drain everything they can, then move on to the next victim." Brandon nodded along like Tyler was sharing profound wisdom instead of bitter rambling. "Look at what Jessica did to me," Tyler continued, gesturing with his beer bottle. 5 years of marriage, and she walks away with half of everything I built, everything I earned. What did she contribute? Nothing. I sat in the kitchen, pretending to work on my laptop while listening to Tyler poison my husband against me and every other woman on the planet. "The smart move," Tyler said, lowering his voice like he was sharing a secret, "is to cut loose before they get too comfortable, before they start thinking they deserve half of what you've worked for. But Camilla's not like that," Brandon said, though his voice lacked conviction. Tyler laughed. "They're all like that, brother. They just hide it better in the beginning." What I found interesting was how Tyler worked. He wasn't subtle about his hatred for women, but he was strategic about how he applied pressure to Brandon. He'd plant seeds of doubt, then back off and let them grow. "I'm not saying Camilla's planning anything," Tyler would say. "But have you noticed how she asks questions about your work lately?" Brandon would look confused. "What kind of questions?" "You know, showing interest in your business meetings, asking about your clients. Seems pretty convenient timing, doesn't it? Right after my divorce?" The truth was, I'd been asking the same types of questions for 2 years, gathering intelligence for my case. But Tyler was reframing my normal behavior as something suspicious and threatening. During one of their business dinners at our house, I overheard Tyler explaining what he called the fundamental problem with marriage. "The mistake most men make," Tyler said, "is treating wives like partners instead of employees. You start sharing information, including them in decisions, and suddenly they think they have a right to everything you've built." "But partnership is supposed to be what marriage is about," Brandon said. "Partnership?" Tyler laughed. "Brandon, what does Camilla bring to this partnership? You pay all the bills, you make all the money, you handle all the important decisions. She makes dinner and looks pretty. That's not a partnership, that's a service arrangement." I continued serving their dinner, my face carefully blank while Tyler systematically dismantled my husband's respect for me. "Look at her," Tyler said, not even bothering to lower his voice. "Sweet, helpful, grateful. But ask yourself, what happens if she decides she wants more? What happens when she gets tired of being the grateful little wife and decides she deserves half of everything you've earned?" Brandon started looking at me differently after those conversations. Where he used to see devoted wife, Tyler was teaching him to see potential threat. The more time Tyler spent at our house, the more I understood how dangerous he really was. Brandon was arrogant and greedy, but Tyler was calculating and cruel. During their business conversations, it became clear that Tyler was the architect of their criminal operation. "The beauty of the system," Tyler explained to Brandon one evening, "is that we're not moving the money directly. We create layers, legitimate businesses, shell companies, international transfers that look like normal commerce. By the time the money reaches its final destination, it's completely clean." "What if someone starts investigating?" Brandon asked. "That's why we use people who can't be easily connected to us," Tyler said. "Independent contractors, people who don't know the full scope of the operation. If anyone gets caught, they can't expose what they don't understand." Brandon was a useful idiot with access to the financial systems Tyler needed. But Tyler was the mastermind, the one who understood how to build a network that could move millions without detection. And Tyler had correctly identified that I was the biggest threat to their operation. "Women are naturally suspicious," he told Brandon. "They notice things, ask questions, remember details. Even innocent ones become dangerous if they learn too much." If only Tyler knew that this innocent woman had already learned enough to send them both to federal prison for the rest of their lives. but I let him keep talking, keep plotting, keep building my case for me with every word. While Brandon and Tyler spent their evenings planning my emotional destruction, I was planning their legal annihilation. Every Tuesday and Thursday, I told Brandon I was going to book club with my friend Lisa Rodriguez. He'd roll his eyes and make jokes about how I was finally finding friends at my intellectual level. "Have fun discussing your romance novels," he'd say dismissively. "Try not to get too excited about the plot twists." If only he knew that Lisa Rodriguez was actually Detective Lisa Rodriguez, and our book discussions were detailed case briefings about the federal investigation that would destroy his entire criminal network. "Brandon's getting careless," I told Lisa during one of our meetings at a quiet cafe across town. "Last night he left financial documents on his home office desk instead of locking them in his safe." "What kind of documents?" Lisa asked, taking notes in what looked like a personal journal but was actually an official case file. "Transfer authorizations for the Singapore accounts, Tyler's routing numbers for the shell companies, and something interesting, a client list with coded names that correspond to the surveillance photos you showed me last month." Lisa's eyes lit up. "You photographed everything?" "Of course. The copies are on the secure drive with everything else. My graphic design work provided perfect cover for the investigation. When clients called the house asking for design consultations, Brandon assumed they were small businesses looking for cheap logos and brochures. In reality, they were federal agents coordinating surveillance, financial analysts requesting specific documents, and prosecutors building the framework for what would be one of the largest money laundering prosecutions in the district's history. "Mrs. Torres, this is Agent Williams from the Cybercrime Division," one client said during a carefully timed phone call while Brandon was in the shower. "We need those server access logs you mentioned for the Sterling Financial Group investigation." "Of course," I replied in my cheerful graphic designer voice. "I'll have those design concepts ready for you by tomorrow morning." Brandon heard my end of the conversation and shook his head. "Another small-time client who wants professional work for amateur prices. You're too nice, Camilla." If he only knew that Agent Williams was actually coordinating digital forensics that would trace every illegal transaction Brandon had processed through Sterling Financial's computer systems. My sister Natasha visited every few weeks, playing the role of loving family member while actually serving as my backup contact and evidence courier. "How's married life treating you?" she'd ask during family dinners, her question coded to check on my safety and the progress of the investigation. "Oh, you know how it is," I'd reply with the practiced smile of a content housewife. "Brandon works so hard, and I'm just trying to be supportive." Brandon would beam with pride at my appropriate wifely attitude, never suspecting that Natasha was actually Agent Natasha Torres, and that our family conversations were opportunities to pass encrypted drives and coordinate federal surveillance. After Brandon and Tyler's dinner guests left each week, I'd carefully clean the dining room while retrieving data from the recording devices I'd hidden throughout the house. The chandelier microphone captured every conversation. The decorative picture frame in Brandon's office contained a camera that recorded every document he thought he was hiding from me. "These guys are absolutely stupid," I told Lisa during one of our briefings. "They discuss federal crimes in detail, using real names and specific dollar amounts, while I'm literally serving them dinner." "What's the latest intelligence?" "Harrison Blake, Brandon's boss, is planning to expand operations into cryptocurrency laundering. They're setting up mining operations in 3 states to process dirty digital currency. Tyler's already identified the locations and the local contacts they plan to use." Lisa whistled softly. "That's huge. Cryptocurrency crimes fall under multiple federal jurisdictions." Gets better. They're planning to use Sterling Financial's existing client relationships to recruit investors for the crypto operation. Basically, they're going to turn legitimate clients into unwitting accomplices. The most satisfying part was watching Brandon become increasingly arrogant as the investigation progressed. The closer we got to having enough evidence for arrests, the more dismissive and cruel he became toward me. "You know what I love about you, Camilla? he said one evening while reviewing financial documents he thought I couldn't understand. You're so simple, so uncomplicated. I never have to worry about you understanding anything important enough to cause problems. That's sweet of you to say, I replied, mentally cataloging the account numbers visible on his paperwork. Brandon thought my simplicity made me safe. He had no idea it made me invisible. And invisible federal prosecutors gathering evidence are the most dangerous people in the world. 3 weeks before my birthday, I started noticing Brandon and Tyler whispering more than usual. They'd stop talking when I entered rooms, exchange meaningful glances during dinner, and Tyler would get this cruel little smile whenever Brandon mentioned my upcoming birthday. We should do something special for Camilla this year, Brandon said one evening while I was cleaning up after another of their business dinners. Oh, definitely, Tyler replied, and I could hear the barely contained laughter in his voice. Something she'll never forget. As a federal prosecutor, I'd learned to read people's intentions through their body language and tone. Tyler and Brandon weren't planning a surprise party or a romantic getaway. They were planning something they thought would devastate me. I started paying closer attention to their conversations, especially when they thought I was out of earshot. The timing is perfect, Tyler said during one of his visits, speaking quietly while I was supposedly upstairs folding laundry. Her birthday, surrounded by all the decorations and celebration stuff. The contrast will make it even more brutal. You really think this is the right approach? Brandon asked, though he didn't sound concerned. He sounded excited. Brandon, trust me. I know women. She's gotten too comfortable, too confident. She thinks she's secure in this marriage. A shock like this will completely destroy that confidence. And then what? Then you get to be the generous husband who gives her a second chance, if she proves she deserves it. She'll spend the next few years being so grateful that you didn't leave her that she'll never question anything you do again. I continued folding towels upstairs, feeling sick as I realized they were planning to use my birthday as an opportunity for psychological torture. Over the following weeks, I watched them plan their cruel surprise with the enthusiasm of children plotting a prank. Tyler researched divorce lawyers and helped Brandon fill out preliminary paperwork. They discussed timing, presentation, and what they expected my reaction to be. She's going to completely fall apart, Tyler predicted during one of their planning sessions. Probably throw herself at your feet, begging you not to leave her. What if she doesn't? Brandon asked. She will. Look at her, Brandon. She's completely dependent on you. She has no real career, no substantial income, no life outside of this marriage. Divorce papers will feel like a death sentence to someone like her. If they only knew that my lack of substantial income was because I was working undercover for the federal government and that I'd been documenting their crimes for 2 years. The morning of my birthday, Tyler called Brandon early to confirm their plan. You have the papers? Tyler asked. Right here, Brandon replied, holding up the manila envelope. I even included a pen so she can sign them right away if she wants to end her suffering quickly. They both laughed like this was the funniest joke in the world. Remember, Tyler coached, when she starts crying and begging, that's when you have the most power. Don't give in too easily. Make her work for your forgiveness. What if she actually signs them? Brandon asked. Tyler scoffed. She won't. Women like Camila don't have the courage to choose uncertainty over security. She'll sign them when hell freezes over. I listened to them plan my humiliation while mentally reviewing the timeline for the federal raid I'd helped coordinate. Everything was set for that afternoon. Search warrants, arrest warrants, and asset seizure orders were all prepared and waiting for my signal. When they left the house that morning to pick up my surprise, Tyler was practically giddy with anticipation. This is going to be legendary, he told Brandon. The look on her face when she realizes you're serious about the divorce, that's going to be priceless. You really think she'll beg? Brandon, by the time we're done with her, she'll promise to do anything to keep you. Anything. They spent their lunch break discussing how they'd handle my inevitable breakdown and what conditions they'd set for taking me back. What they didn't know was that while they were planning my destruction, I was putting the finishing touches on theirs. The gift I'd prepared for them contained arrest warrants with their names on them, along with a USB drive containing 2 years of evidence that would send them to federal prison. Their legendary prank was about to become their final mistake, and I couldn't wait to see the looks on their faces when they realized who had really been playing whom all along. At exactly 3:17 p.m., while Brandon and Tyler were still celebrating their successful birthday prank at their favorite steakhouse, federal agents surrounded the Sterling Financial Group building. I watched from across the street as Agent Harrison led the raid, search warrants in hand while local police blocked every exit. The operation I'd spent 2 years building was finally in motion. My phone buzzed with a text from Detective Rodriguez. Package delivered. Both targets in custody. Brandon and Tyler had been arrested in the restaurant parking lot before they could even open my gift. At 6:23 p.m., they sat in adjacent holding cells at the federal courthouse, still in their expensive suits but wearing handcuffs and confused expressions. "This has to be a mistake," Brandon kept saying to anyone who would listen. "I work in legitimate finance. There's been some kind of mix-up." Tyler was quieter, but I could see the wheels turning in his head as he tried to figure out how their foolproof operation had been exposed. That's when Agent Martinez brought them my gift. "You were specifically instructed to open this later," he said, placing the wrapped box on the metal table in their shared holding area. "Now seems like the perfect time." Brandon's hands shook as he tore off the wrapping paper. Inside was a clear plastic box containing several items that made both men go pale. 2 arrest warrants with their names printed in official federal letterhead, a USB drive labeled Evidence Taurus Investigation 2019-2023, and a handwritten note in my careful script. Tyler grabbed the note and read it aloud, his voice getting weaker with each word. "Dear Brandon and Tyler, thank you for 4 years of evidence gathering. You made my job incredibly easy. By the way, my name isn't really Camila Torres, the graphic designer. I'm federal prosecutor Camila Torres, and I've been building a money laundering case against your organization since before Brandon and I met. Every conversation you had in my house was recorded. Every document you left on Brandon's desk was photographed. Every business meeting you conducted in my dining room was documented. Your business dinners with Harrison Blake, I recorded everything. The shell companies Tyler created, I traced every transaction. The client lists you thought were so secret, I memorized every name. Brandon, when you left financial documents on your desk thinking I was too stupid to understand them, I was actually copying them for the FBI. When you discussed cryptocurrency operations in front of me, you were confessing to federal crimes while a federal prosecutor took notes. Tyler, your advice about keeping wives in the dark would have been smarter if you'd followed it yourself. Instead, you educated me about every aspect of your criminal network while believing I was too simple to understand what you were saying. The divorce papers you served me today, I signed them gladly. Not because I was heartbroken, but because I was finally free to drop my act and prosecute the case I've been building against you both. Happy birthday to me. Camila Torres, Assistant U.S. Attorney, Financial Crimes Division. The USB drive contained everything. 2 years of audio recordings, financial documents, transaction records, client communications, and video footage of their business meetings in my dining room. Brandon dropped the note like it was on fire. "This is impossible. She's a graphic designer. She's simple. She doesn't understand business or law or—" "She's a federal prosecutor, you idiot," Tyler whispered, staring at the evidence drive. "She's been playing us since day one. But she seemed so stupid, so grateful, so helpless." Tyler's voice was bitter. "That was the point. We completely underestimated her because we wanted to believe we were superior." The trial began 6 months later. I testified for 3 days, finally able to drop my act and demonstrate my actual expertise in financial law and criminal prosecution. Brandon sat at the defendant's table looking shell-shocked as I explained how his own arrogance had provided most of the evidence against him. The defendant frequently discussed illegal transactions in front of me, I testified, because he believed I was too intellectually inferior to understand what he was saying. Tyler's defense attorney tried to argue that my undercover operation was entrapment, but the evidence was overwhelming. I hadn't coerced them into committing crimes. I'd simply documented the crimes they were already committing. In the end, Brandon received 15 years for money laundering and fraud. Tyler got 20 years as the operations architect. Harrison Blake and 8 other associates received sentences ranging from 5 to 12 years. Standing outside the courthouse after the verdicts, Detective Rodriguez asked me how it felt to finally close the case. "Like justice," I said, watching the prison transport van drive away with my former husband inside. 4 years of pretending to be someone else, but it was worth it to take down an organization that had stolen millions from legitimate businesses and enabled criminal enterprises worldwide. Brandon had been right about one thing. I was simple enough to fool him completely while building the case that destroyed his life.